Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Zoner.
And I'm John Davis.
Welcome to Spirit Cafe.
Come in, sit down, and
grab a cup of love.
A Spirituality Without the Guilt podcast. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to Spirit Cafe. As you know, my co-host is one of those magnificent people who likes to sing and has that musical element in her life. I used to be in an a cappella group myself called the Acapellers, and music was a big part of my life for a very long time. So we both have found joy and love in our music, which I think is a connection to spirit itself. And today we have a man on the show that we're going to bring in a little bit later named Dave Combs, and he'll share his musical story as well. But before we bring Dave in, of course, I have to introduce the musical maven, the mistress of melody, the matron of magnificence, Miss Tamara Zoner. Hello, Tamara Zoner.
Hi, John. That was very, very good and entertaining.
Thanks. I just wrote them in between our doing this morning.
I love it. Crying, so good. Thank you for that beautiful, beautiful welcome. Yeah, music is spirit. I love how you said that in the intro. That was great.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. I'm really excited about our guest today because when you look at him online, it's like, oh, that's impressive stuff that we're talking about. And he and I have a little bit in common because we both, he lives in Tennessee, and I spent a good deal of time in Tennessee as the entertainment director of the Tennessee Renaissance Festival for several years. And I love Tennessee. I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country I've ever seen, actually. So, but before we get talking about what we want to talk about, let's bring Dave in and have a real conversation. And Dave, welcome to the show.
Yeah, do you mind if I join in on this fun we're having here today?
Love to have you.
Yeah.
Well, we are so happy to have you here. And that is the key. We like to make it fun because we find the spirit comes in fun and joy and love. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and just tell us a little bit about Dave Combs.
Well, I will. I'm delighted to tell you that I was born and raised in East Tennessee, up in a little town called Irwin, near Johnson City, between there and Asheville in the North Carolina side. And I grew up around music all my life. I think if you're from Tennessee, it's a state law that you must play an instrument. So, I love music now. I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina now, but I have since 1969 when I graduated from college at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City. I got my math degree and physics minor, and I worked in the computer center for 4 years of college, and I started my career out as a computer programmer for a company called Western Electric. It was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system, and so I was a computer programmer, and I've been in technology on my formal career all my life. And so, but music was always an underlying part of my being, because growing up in East Tennessee with my parents and my grandmother Combs, which this is my Granny Combs's instrument, her autoharp. Same kind of autoharp that Mother Maybelle Carter played, and you can Google and do YouTube on this autoharp, and you'll find lots of her playing it. But my Granny Combs could make that thing talk. She was born in 1894 in Virginia, and so my earliest memories are going to Granny's house, and as soon as I could tune something up, she'd hand me her autoharp, say, "David," she always called me David. She said, "David, would you tune up my autoharp?" And I'd sit there and I'd tune it up to the best I could. And then I'd hand it to her, and she'd sit down there and she'd just play that thing. She could just sing and sing Amazing Grace, or all those wonderful old hymns. And so I grew up around that kind of love of music all my life.
Wow.
And so that's my early beginning, and I still love music, and I just turned 75 years old this week. So
happy birthday.
Yeah, wow. So it's been a long journey with music, and when we get to talking about my book is really just a biography, not so much about me, but a biography of my music, really. The journey that I've taken over these many years with my music. And I've been really blessed, and as you will know before the show is over, I have a million stories I can tell about my music and that journey.
Well, I love hearing you talk. Well, first of all, I love the Tennessee accent anyway, because I think it's melodious itself. It has a
musical,
tone
yeah.
through it. It's beautiful. But I like the way you talk about your family and how she could play it so well, and you can feel your passion for it as you're talking. And to me, that's a big key part about doing anything well, is finding the joy and the love inside of it.
That's correct. And when you find something, and sometimes things you discover in life don't happen until somewhere down the road. I was 33 years old when I wrote my first song.
Huh.
Rachel's song was written in January of 1981. Well, that was 41 years ago. Mm-hmm. But for the first 33 years of my life, I had never written a song. Now, I'd loved music. I was a choir director at my home church for a while, and another church for a while. And I loved singing in the choir, sang in the university choir. Music was a big part, but I always sang and played somebody else's music. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I sat down at my piano one evening, as I did about every day, to relax. Now, those of you that when you sing, I'm sure you would say that if you want to relax, you just put on some of your favorite music, close your eyes, and you can just lose yourself in the music in a heartbeat like that. Yeah. Well, that's the way I relaxed when I got home. So I sat down that one evening at my piano, and I just played this song. I didn't try to write a song. I didn't play a song that was in front of me. I played it. And I cannot explain it except that it had to be inspired. Mm-hmm. It was a gift to me that was given through my fingers onto that piano, and I played it. And that song changed my entire life. And at the time I did it, I didn't even realize I'd written a song. I just played it.
Mm. Tell us the story of what happened with that song. Tell this audience about that song. I've read about what happened with it, but tell us about it.
Well, it is a fascinating journey, because from there, a couple of days later, after I had first played it, my wife comes home from work and she says, "Dave, what is this song that I've had stuck in my head all day long?" You know how you get an earworm and that song, you're all day long, that song is with you. Yeah. Well, she says, here, and she hummed a little bit of it. And I said, "Well, Linda, it doesn't have a name." And she says, "What do you mean? It's something that you play on the piano all the time." I said, "Well, it's just something I made up." It's the way I described it. And she says, "You made it up? You wrote that?" I said, "Well, I guess it's something I made up." "Have you written it down?" "No, I've got it up here in my mind. It's not going to go anywhere." And so she says, "Nope, you got to write that down, because something might happen to you and that song would be gone forever." So I said, "Okay, yes, ma'am." So I wrote down.
That was the correct answer, Dave. That was the correct answer.
Yep. So there's a lot of you're right, honey. Yes, ma'am.
Secret to marriage right there.
We've been married now 52 years coming up in June. So
and you're still saying yes, ma'am, aren't you?
Yes, sir. I am. Anyway, so I did write it down and put it in my piano bench. And we tried to come up with a good name for it, and nothing we ever came up with fit the song. And then you roll the calendar forward a couple of years. Some friends of ours had a little baby girl named Rachel. And so at Rachel's christening service, Linda and I are sitting there with the family and the minister. It was a private service in this little country church. And at the front of the church on the platform was this beautiful baby grand piano. And all during the formal christening service, I'm listening, of course, to all these wonderful words of blessing about little Rachel. And I keep looking at that piano, and toward the end, I punched Linda and I said, "Hey, what do you think about me playing this little song now as part of the service?" She said, "I think that's a great idea." So I said, "Okay." I went up to the front and asked the family and the minister if it was okay if I played a song on the piano. Now, they weren't there to hear me do a concert. This was all about little Rachel. But they said, okay. So I went over to the piano and I sat down and I played this song. And about most of the way through the song, I hear this people clearing their throat and a few sniffles here and there. And I noticed that my eyes were getting teardrops coming down on my cheeks. And well, if you've ever been to a little baby's christening service, they're tender anyway. I mean, it doesn't take much to get a tear to come out of your eye. So at the end of the song, when I finally finished playing it, I looked over at little Rachel in the arms of her mother, and I said, from now on, this song will be called Rachel's Song in her honor. And that's how it got its name, and it was the perfect name for the song.
Oh, beautiful.
So beautiful. Oh.
And then the next thing that needed to happen was, what are you going to do with it now that I've got a song with a name? And I was working for AT&T, or for Western Electric at the time, and then it became, in 1984, it became part of AT&T. So roll the calendar forward 3 more years to 1986. I'm working with AT&T, doing a lot of consulting with the factories around the country on putting in new software for the factories. And one of the towns that I'm having to work in is Nashville, Tennessee. Well, I love Nashville, Tennessee, still love Nashville, Tennessee, and it was a perfect place for me to do something with my music. And Linda said, it seems like all the good ideas in my family come from this girl named Linda, doesn't it? And that's probably true. Thanks to Linda, a lot of good things have happened. So Linda says, why don't you, while you're there in Nashville, and you don't have anything to do in the evenings, why don't you find a little studio to get a demo professional recording made of Rachel's song, something you can have. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So one evening, I'm driving around Nashville looking for a studio, try to find a place to get Rachel's song recorded. And I go over to the part of town called Music Square. You probably remember that's that about 2 square block area that's got the Country Music Hall of Fame and BMI headquarters, ASCAP headquarters, and the old RCA studios that you can take a tour of that historic place. And then I'm driving down this one side street called Roy Acuff Place. Mm-hmm. And you remember Roy Acuff is a very famous, much loved musician there in Nashville for many years. They named a street after him. And down at the end of Roy Acuff Place is a big building with a barn-shaped roof. And out front near the street is this big water wheel that they've obviously taken from a real old mill somewhere and put it there on the corner. And on the side of the building, it says, the Music Mill. And I said, okay, this sounds encouraging. Pulled in the parking lot, and I see a man sitting at a desk in the lobby. So I go over and knock on the door. He unlocks it and opens it, and he says, I'm George Clinton. Can I help you? And now it's a different George Clinton. It's not. There are a lot of George Clintons around, but this one was a recording engineer in Nashville.
That is good storytelling. There, you really brought us in, sucked us in,
Yeah.
then you dashed all our hopes. Good job.
Oh, I'm sorry about it. Now, but wait a minute. Let's just remember that George Clinton, bless his heart, he's since passed away. He was so loved in Nashville as a recording engineer. They did a full page spread in the Nashville, Tennessean newspaper about George. He is, you can Google George Clinton recording engineer. And anyway, but I didn't know that at the time. He was just somebody that opened the door. And I told him, I said, I'm looking for a studio. And he says, well, come on in. So I walked in the lobby, and up on the left is a great big life-size picture of Glenn Campbell. Mm-hmm. And right in the middle in front of me is this huge panorama picture of the group Alabama. Mm. Over here's a great big picture of the Forrester sisters. And then there's gold records and platinum records, all, how they line the wall with everything that they got to brag about in the studio. Wonderful. So I told George I had never been in a studio in my life, and he probably could tell that from my reaction. And he said, but there's nobody recording right now. It's 6:00 in the evening, and it's unusual that they're not anybody recording. But let me give you a tour of the place. So he took me over into Studio A, which is the big studio. We go in the big recording room where musicians set up. You could put an orchestra in there, and they probably had. I mean, it was a big room, big 9-foot concert grand piano over in the corner, and isolation rooms around the wall, and really impressive place. And he said, well, let's go over into the control room where all the magic happens. So he opens this big, thick door. It's about 8 inches thick, soundproof door. You go in the room, and first thing I see is the console. This console looked like it was 8 feet long, probably was, had 32 tracks, it turns out, of channels that it could record on. So it was a big, long console. Sliders and buttons and knobs and lights and everything. And then around the wall were these recording machine tape recorders of analog and digital, and over the speakers, over the big glass window where you could see out into the recording room, was big monitor speakers. And I said, gosh, George, how much does this place rent for? And he says, it's $125 an hour plus engineer. Now remember, this was 1986. In today's dollars, $125 an hour is probably over $400 an hour. A lot of money. So I'm sure he saw my face kind of go, oh no, I can't do this. He said, all right, Dave, the fellow who owns this studio owns a tiny little studio across the street, and it's $15 an hour plus engineer. I said, yes, thank you, Lord, I can do this. So all I need now, George, is a musician to play my little song. It's a piano piece, very simple. I need a good piano player. And he thought for a second. He said, I know just the person for you. He said his name is Gary Prim, P-R-I-M, and he and I've known him forever. We go to church together. He's a great musician. Everybody loves Gary Prim. So let's go back to my desk and I'll look up his phone number for you. So he did, wrote it on a piece of paper and gave it to me. Well, I thanked him profusely, and I went out and got in my rental car, and I hightailed it back to my hotel near the airport so I could call Gary Prim, because this was 1986. Guess what hadn't been invented yet? Cell phones weren't in existence. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't Google anything. None of this existed. So I go to the hotel room on my landline and call Gary's number and get his answering machine. 30 minutes or so, he calls me back. And, hi, this is Gary Prim. Can I help you? Yep. George Clinton says you do a great job recording a demo for me. He says, well, I'll be glad to. I said, well, what do you need from me to do this? And he says, I just need two things. Send me a recording of you playing it on the piano so I'll kind of know what it sounds like. And send me a lead sheet. And I said, okay, what's a lead sheet? I didn't know the lingo of the music Nashville scene yet. But he said, oh, it's just the melody and the chords written out on a piece of paper. I said, oh, well, I've got that. I just didn't know to call it a lead sheet. So when I got back home after that trip, I mailed Gary my lead sheet and the cassette tape of me playing it on the piano. And on Friday evening, August the 22nd, 1986, at 6 p.m., I'll never forget that date and time in my life, I met Gary Prim at this tiny little studio across the street from the music mill. He comes walking in with his Yamaha DX7 analog synthesizer under his arm, and I meet him. He's friendly as he can be, instant friend, one of those friendly Tennessee, Tennesseans are friendly by nature anyway, but Gary is exceptionally friendly. But he sets his synthesizer down and goes over to this little Yamaha baby grand piano that's in the studio. And I go into the control room with the engineer. So Gary's warming up on the piano, and pretty soon he says, I'm ready to record. So, okay, the engineer says, I'm push the record button. We're rolling. And so we start the recording. And Gary plays mostly through the song, and he gets, a certain part, and he stops. And he says, signals to the engineer to rewind the tape back. He said, I can do better than that. So rewind the tape, start over. This time he plays it all the way through perfect. I mean, no mistakes at all. Absolutely. Now remember, I have never heard my music played by anybody but me in my life. This song I'm the only one that's ever played it. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what to expect. When you hire a professional to create something from you, you're going to get something probably more spectacular than you expected. And boy, was it ever. What I heard in that studio from the control room was as good as any piano performance I'd ever heard on the radio. I don't care whether it was Roger Williams or Henry Mancini or whoever. It sounded as good as I'd ever heard. And if he had stopped right there and said, that's it, I would have been happy, because it was great. But Gary says, I'm not done yet. He said, I've been working on this, and I want to make this arrangement really special. He said, I'm going to take my synthesizer and I'm going to double the piano part on an electric piano sound on the synthesizer. He called it doubling, which meant he's playing exactly the same notes that he played on the real piano on an electric piano, which gives him a fuller sound. So he sets up, and we set 2 more tracks to record the synthesizer. And I can't believe he nailed it. I mean, how he because this was not with what they call a click track. It wasn't a very steady beat. It was very with feeling and everything. But he nailed every note, just the same feeling you had on the real piano. Amazing. And then he says, well, this needs some bottom and some top. So I'm going to add some low strings and some high strings. So 2 more tracks to record the low strings off the synthesizer sound. 2 more tracks, record the high strings like a violin on the high part of it. And then he said, now, certain parts of this needs a little extra punch. He said, I'm going to put in some horn sound. So 2 more tracks, record, switch it to horn sound. He plays that through there. So now he said, I think that's it. So he comes into the control room. We all sit there, and the engineer puts it everything so we can hear it all together. And he plays it. Gary says, I like it. It's just exactly what I heard in my head. So that's perfect. And I don't know whether I said anything or not. I was in such an amazed state of mind that I was probably with my mouth open in total awe of what I'd heard. I loved it. So I wrote Gary his check for the agreed upon fee, and he packs up his synthesizer and heads out the door. I didn't know whether I would ever see that young man ever again or not, because he was, in his late 20s, and I was probably 36 or so years old. And first time I'd ever seen him, I had no idea what was going to happen. Turns out that young man and I would go back in the studio over 15 years and record over 170 songs in the studio, over 120 of which I wrote. But anyway, so here I am in the control room. The engineer makes me some cassette tape copies of the recording and mixes down my master tape. I pay him, and I'm done. Take my cassette, get in my rental car, pop it into my player in my rental car, and play it. Turned up loud, and I'm just sitting there in the parking lot, just in heaven, listening to this unbelievable music that's just been created. I mean, just now. So I head back to the hotel. I'm heading around Nashville, Tennessee. There's a bunch of interstates that weave in and out. If you don't know where you're going in Nashville, good luck, because there's 3 interstates that intersect there, that fly over and under and around each other. And if you're in the left lane, you need to be in the right. You may be going to Kentucky. You may be going to Alabama. I don't know where.
I learned when I was there, you just look for the bat tower and head to the center.
That's right. But so I was absorbed in the music, and I'd rewind it and play it again, rewind it and play it again. And I looked up and I said, I have seen that billboard at least twice. I had completely circled Nashville. I missed my turn to the exit to the airport. I was just going this way, around and around Nashville. Well, I finally got my GPS senses about me and made it to the hotel eventually. And I wanted to tell my wife about it. I didn't have, we didn't have cell phones or any way to play or send the music anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I only could call her from my landline in the hotel room. And I know I was talking a mile a minute, and I was so excited, and she knew it was going to be good, but she could tell that it was better than good. And so I explained it to her, but I said, you'll just have to wait till Monday when I get home, and I'll play it for you. And then I hung up and I said, I cannot sit in this hotel room by myself with this music. I got to go find somebody to play it for. I mean, even if they're a total stranger. So I went to the local Circuit City store. I don't think they're even in business anymore, but back then they were the big electronics store.
Yep.
I took my cassette in there, and I found a sales clerk, and I said, show me the best stereo systems that you have in the store here. And so let's go over here in the big room. And so he take over there. Okay, here's this cassette. Why don't you play this on your best system you got? And he said, okay. I said, now turn it up. I want to hear it real good through these big speakers. So he did, and it sounded as good as it did back in the studio. And the funny thing, I looked around the store, and all the people that were customers in there were kind of stopped, like, whoa, what is that song that's playing over there? And I thought, this is really special. It is a good special. It hits me good and hits everybody else too. So anyway, I knew at that point, I said to myself, this is it. I didn't know what it was, but I kept saying, this is it. When you have something just is so overwhelmingly positive and powerful in your life, whether it's someone you meet or something you do or something you create, deep down, this has deeper and long-term meaning than you probably even appreciate at the moment. Well, that was me at that point in my song.
Right. Well, let me. I want to go back. Because I'm listening to this story, and the whole time I'm listening to this story, I'm smiling.
Me too.
I'm sitting here enjoying the whole. And what I find so fascinating about this story is the very first thing you said. I sat down, and the song came out of me.
Yeah.
I sat down, and something came through me, and then this whole series of amazing and miraculous events happened when you followed that. When you took that thing that came from wherever, from God, yada yada, and came into you, and then you listened, and then you acted upon it. You put faith in it, and you acted upon it. And when you were at the christening, and you got the nudge to play it at the christening and name it. I mean, that was all inspired, and I find the whole story of, meeting the top technician and the great musician, and all those things are falling in place because you listened and you followed. And I think that that's just a beautiful, beautiful story. Tamara, what's your thoughts on that?
I love it. And I was reading the message you sent on Podmatch, and without ever saying the words, you just told us the many ways that God has guided you in your life to share your musical gifts, right? That was your wording in the message to me. And without ever saying, I listened to God, you clearly listened. You got those little nudges of inspiration. And in my view, and because this is Spirit Cafe and it's what we talk about, that is direct from Spirit, right? Blowing the wind behind you, guiding you to where you needed to be to get your music out into the world. And it's and Linda, of course, definitely an angel in your ear.
Or I don't know if it's on your ear, but definitely on your back.
Oh yeah. Little nudge. Go, Dave, go.
Together, it sounds like you're both very much listening in and allowing that guidance to come through you, and then music. All of us here are musicians in our own way and artists in our own way. And to allow that to come through is something really special. And to know too, that it's bigger than your head, right? Like it's bigger than your mind. The music moves spirit, and you didn't let ego get in the way, whether big or small ego, right? You just did what you felt called to do. And that's so beautiful. I love your story. Is so good. And you're such a captivating storyteller too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
and
that.
Dave, when you said you sat down and you just started playing, to me, that's fascinating, because one of the ways that I'm artistic is I'm a scriptwriter. And I find that I don't plot them out. I don't outline them. I sit down and I just write. And what happens is I just let whatever comes through onto the page. And then I go back later and I'm directing it on stage or something. And I start seeing all of this foreshadowing and all of this very technical writing in this script that just poured onto the page. And to me, that's exactly what you did. This very nuanced piece came through you, and you just put it on the page. And then now afterwards, you went to the musician, who then said, well, I feel this too. Let me add this to this. And it just grew and grew and grew. I love all this. I love it.
I've always been amazed that, and Gary Prim and his wife, Julie, and their two kids, they're like family to us now, obviously. And we communicate very frequently, and I've just feel so blessed that his interpretation of my music that I wrote just fit like hand in glove with I am a composer. I am not a professional performer. He is a professional performing session musician. But the two together, he can take something that I created and add his magic and blessed and really almost as spiritually guided touch to it. And it just comes out. I couldn't have asked for better. And some people ask me, well, how do you prepare this? Do you write it all out and whatever and send it to Gary? the secret to our success as a team was that I would write the melody and the chords, just the very basic, call it the skeleton of a song, send it to him, and the least amount of direction that I would give him to the song, the better it came out in the end, because he wasn't constrained by my trying to guide him. Well, I think it needs to go this way or that way. I always had the faith in him that he would make it perfect, and it always worked out. So it was not a matter of having to micromanage that process in the studio.
Right.
I turned that over to the good Lord and to Gary and let that happen. And it
faith,
always
faith, not structure.
Yes, exactly. It always happened. It was great.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I was so captivated by you telling the story, as Tamara was saying, and like I said, we were both smiling all the way through it. And to me, that feeling of that smile, that joy, is a connection to God. And when you're speaking and you're telling this story about how you had the same sort of experience, and then I love going to Circuit City, and that guy thought he was getting a big sale, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
But I thought I loved every aspect of this story, because to me it's a prime example of really having faith and following and doing, and living that feeling, that expression of joy. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Tamara, is there anything you'd like to add into this at all?
I just want to know, and I bet everybody listening wants to know, Dave, like, where do we find you? Where do we find your book? Where do we find your music? How do we immerse ourselves in more of you and
Dave
your music?
and Linda,
and Linda, of course. That's right. Well, I have a very simple website. If you can remember my last name, Combs, Combs, it's just combsmusic.com.
It's ironic too, Dave, because I don't think either one of us use one.
Well, I got a haircut yesterday. When I came home, you can tell I love my barber. His name is Billy Mitchell, and we just sat and talked. And I think the more I talk, the more he cuts. Well, as you can tell, he cut just about limit. I got home, and Linda says, "What happened to you?"
Well, I like it.
I love it.
Like it.
I can wash my hair and dry it in about 2 seconds.
Amen, brother. Amen. It's us phallically challenged need to stick together.
Yeah. So anyway, I forgot where I was headed with my story now.
Your website, your last name.
Oh yeah, how to get to my website. Yeah.
Combs Music.
Combsmusic.com. And on my website homepage, it's not a long page, it's mainly a landing page. On the left, you'll see the picture of my cover of my book. And right below it will be a link that will take you right to Amazon, where you can read all about it, do the look inside. You can listen to me read part of it and so forth. But you can purchase a paperback book, or you can get an e-book on Kindle, or you can listen to me read it to you for 8 hours on an Audible book.
That's what I vote for.
I totally do too.
Okay, well, you get prepared for my Tennessee accent for you for 8 hours. So I sat right here where I am right now for 30 hours recording that thing. That was a big job.
Wow.
But anyway, I got it done. But on the other side of my homepage, you'll find the picture of my cover of CD of Rachel's song, with a link underneath it to get either get a physical CD, or you can download the MP3 files, or you can stream it if you're an Amazon Music person. And so underneath there's a link to Amazon to get that. And in the middle of the page is a link that I put there last year because so many people wanted it. It just says play Rachel's song. And I talk about Rachel's song so many times, I wanted to make really simple for people to find it real quick and listen to it.
Nice.
And when you click on that, it will play the original demo recording that I had of Rachel's song. It has never been remixed. And when you listen to it, now that I've described that process of adding the horns and the electric piano, you'll hear that now, and it goes through it. And there's one special aspect of it that really caught my ear in the studio, was when Gary played the verse and the chorus twice in the key of C. And then he instantly went up to the key of C sharp to play the last verse and chorus.
Mm.
And that there was no modulation to it. It was just boom, boom, right? You're there. And it just kind of, I call it a musical surprise. It just raises the level of energy in the song up a level and added so much to it. And so you'll hear that as well. So when you play Rachel's song, you're hearing that original demo recording as I heard it that year, 41 years ago.
You said that's on your website?
Right on the website, right in the middle. Play Rachel's song right there. And then my email address is right at the bottom there. It's just simple, dave@combsmusic.com. And I love to hear from people and write to me, tell me your stories about how my music touched your life. And I've gotten letters from over 50,000 people about my music. 50,000.
Wow.
And I devoted one whole chapter in my book, chapter 21, to some of those selected notes and letters, and they're better get your box of Kleenex out when you read it. I mean, to tell you, there's some serious heart-touching stories in there about how the music touched people at a special time in their life, whether it was the birth of a baby, the death of a loved one, or a wedding, or any special occasion. Those stories are in there, and it's just wonderful. I've heard from Paul Harvey even wrote me a couple of letters.
Oh, really?
He and his wife loved my music. They would put my CD on and play it for dinner time at their house. I heard him talk about me on the radio one time.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. And now you know the rest of the story.
There you go. And you did that with a great flair, great Paul Harvey flair. Well, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for coming here today, Dave.
Well, thank you all for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. It's we've done a whole lot of smiling. I think our face muscles are going to need a break after this.
I have to go rest for a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's right. But it's been a pleasure and a joy. Thank you all so much.
Thank
You're
you.
quite welcome.
Joy for us. Love it.
Tamara, you want to take us out of this thing?
Oh, absolutely. I hope everybody watching and listening feels as good as we do right now. And really, that is the essence of everything that John and I talk about on this podcast. Love, right? What you've just experienced is 35 minutes of love, pure love. So go check out Dave Combs' webpage and get that song and read his book. I know I'm going to listen to it. Because I could listen to you all day, Dave. So I'm going to. And we will talk to you again next week. Listeners, we are grateful for you.
Thank you for joining us at Spirit Cafe, a place where you can safely explore your spirituality without the guilt or dogma of religion. Please leave all comments on the Spirit Cafe podcast Facebook page or beneath our videos on YouTube.